Here's what's coming up on the Cold Popcast.
What's the benefit of having a good ESG score? Like, how do companies, like, I know they want to have a high one, but why is that? Like, what's the benefit?
Doing so would increase their ESG score. Then a company like BlackRock would invest in their business. They manage, I want to say, $66 trillion worth of assets, and the entire assets on the planet is apparently 400 trillion.
What's poppin', everybody?
Welcome back to the Cold Popcast.
I'm Zoe.
And I'm Steve.
All right, and put on your learning hacks, guys, because we're going to be learning about ESGs today.
Yeah, so ESG scores, it's actually something that it affects all of our lives, but most people have no idea what it is. Mm-hmm. So ESG actually stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. So the environmental and social and governance factors, basically what they're used for is to determine whether a company is worthy of being funded. So think like corporations, like Target, Budweiser.
It's actually pretty simple.
Like any big stakeholding company.
Yeah.
So pretty much what these scores measure is things like carbon emissions, diversity, employee safety. All of those things are combined into a score, and if your score is high, you're fundable. If your score is low, you're not fundable. Okay. So a lot of this information is actually like sort of monitored by the UN. They are the ones that make the principles that determine what is something that will get you a high ESG score versus a low ESG score. There's a lot of different other nonprofit organizations that contribute to the process as well. But what we found now is that the UN seems to have like a bit of a chokehold on the companies that actually determine what those companies do. So it's not like the CEO who makes the decision. Okay. It's like an NGO or the UN that makes the decision in how a company is run a lot of the time.
I see. Okay, well, first off, everyone take off your learning hat and put on your tinfoil hat because we're about to go down a rabbit hole right now.
Okay, so let's actually hear the first video, the first little timestamp we got. So this kind of gives a little bit more of a breakdown on how the ESG scores are typically used. You go ahead and play it.
So wait, UN as in like United Nations? Yes. What the hell does United Nations has to do with the way Bud Light or Target or other businesses on S&P do business? Well, this is how they have had the chokehold on companies to get them to hit a score so they do what United Nations wants them to do, which is what a lot of people in America are worried, saying, wait a minute, why not just worry about America? Who the hell are those guys to tell us how we live our lives, how we run our companies? That's what happens when companies become global companies. Some of these companies want more control. Let me even go deeper into how much control United Nations.
You can actually pause it.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, there's like this, and it's basically there's like this globalized conglomerate that basically has a stake in a lot of companies and global organizations, or organizations in general, and they have a large influence off of like the type of behaviors or like the type of messaging that they want these companies to have, right?
Yeah, so it functions a lot like, if you ever heard the term social credit score.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a score that is like a business social credit score, where it's like if your business doesn't hold up these social, economic, governance policies, then they're not going to have a good score, so they're not going to be able to participate as thoroughly in the marketplace.
And what's the benefit about having a good score versus a bad score for these things?
So I would say a reason to have a good score would be that, so a company like BlackRock. So there's 3 different companies that basically own a share. They own a majority share in 88% of all of the S&P 500 companies. So these are basically the top 500 companies in the country. BlackRock, Vanguard, and there's another one I'm forgetting, but these 3 companies, they all own a certain percentage of all of the top companies in the world. And they're the ones that want to push those specific agendas, I guess. But not agenda in like a conspiratorial way, but agenda in the sense like they have their agenda that they like, for example, environmental friendliness. Like if you look back into your own life, you've probably seen a lot of times where random companies were pushing environment, like we're going green. Yeah. Like we're going green now. And it wasn't out of the goodness of their hearts. It wasn't actually to change like emissions factors, carbon emissions or anything like that. It was more so just because doing so would increase their ESG score. Then a company like BlackRock would invest in their business.
Okay.
It's all making sense.
And I'm guessing other messages like do they do any like social messages, I guess, like whether they want to have like more an increase in certain like either racial or gender equality type stuff like that, stuff you would say I guess is traditionally liberal or woke?
Yeah, so like that's like where like DEI comes in, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So like so like diversity, equity, and inclusion is actually that's the process that sort of defines whether or not companies will hire people that are from minority backgrounds, people that are, so like think women and like racial ethnic groups.
Yeah.
You know, that's what decides. So like basically your score will go up if you have people join your company that are diverse and you provide them with equity and you include people. So you include women, you include minorities, and in doing so, you get a better score.
All right.
If you don't do that, then you get a worse score.
Okay, so companies are essentially, or organizations in general, are incentivized to have or to do like things that are in line with whatever agendas that like the ESG.
ESG, yeah, like
Yeah.
The leaders, like the people that are like the United Nations.
UN.
Yeah. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know the names. I guess I want to say like the leaders of that, but let's just I'll refer to them as like the ESG. Like they're incentivized to like incorporate like whether it's having diversity in the workplace, environmentally friendly messages, or like if they are like manufacture things that are environmentally good or sound. So okay, I get that. I think with my original question about what's the difference between a high S&G and a low S&G or ESG, I mean, is what's the benefit of having a good ESG score? Like how do companies, like I know they want to have a high one, but why is that? Like what's the benefit?
So
question.
like I mentioned earlier, like the ESG score is obviously it leads to more funding, but it's also like a social thing. Like you get people will look at you. They'll look at the company as like woke. For example. Like they'll see the company as more woke.
Okay.
If they actually have a high ESG score, but
so public reception, is there any monetary benefit for them to have that?
the main monetary benefit is that people will be more willing to fund, and you're less likely to get funded with a low ESG score. So like you won't be able to get actual not donations but investment. Or shareholders may leave. They may sell or maybe leave the investment that they've made because they recognize that you're not, like, for example, if you think about it, like if you worked for a company and they didn't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion thing, and they only promoted white people and they never promoted black people. It's kind of like that. So it's not necessarily always like good or bad or good versus bad.
Okay.
Sometimes the DEI stuff actually is a benefit because it allows people that are in like minority situations to be able to get certain roles that they wouldn't typically be able to get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are these investors? Is it kind of like, because I know how you're explaining it there, like I said, people in general would probably get turned off to the idea of not having a good social or environmental message, or some type of policies that increase shoot for diversity, which would, like I said, make people not want to either invest or participate in those services. But let's say like the overall, like let's say BlackRock and stuff like that. I know you mentioned that they won't get funding from them or Vanguard. Are those like the only companies that essentially make up the ESG? Like they're the ones, because like, do they have a lot of stake in the ESG and how many businesses they back up? Or if, let's say, you have a low ESG, like it doesn't necessarily matter because like you still have a bunch of other like investors and stuff like that would make up for like their lack of support.
I think it's like this. People go where the money is. Right? So if BlackRock and Vanguard and whatever the third one is, if they have all of the money, then people are going to go to them first.
Okay.
If they can't get something from them, there's other investors who are less invested in the whole ESG system and all that stuff. So they can get investment, but it just won't be because these three companies, they actually, I want to say they manage, I want to say $66 trillion worth of assets. Jesus. And the entire assets on the planet is apparently 400 trillion. So that's about 15% of all the assets on the planet are managed by these three firms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I can see why you would really want them on your side, because it's like, I mean, they literally by themselves control 15% of the money flow market in the world. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see this next video clip. on the screen it says how BlackRock made ESG the hottest ticket on Wall Street.
With analysts, he added BlackRock is a leader in this being ESG. And we are seeing the flows, and I continue to see this big shift in investor portfolios. What Think did not say is that BlackRock drove a significant part of that shift by inserting its primary ESG fund into popular and influential model portfolios offered to investment advisors who use them with clients across North America. The huge flows from such models mean many investors got into an ESG vehicle without necessarily choosing one as a specific investment strategy or even knowing that their money has gone into one. In short, an apparent BlackRock-led rush of investors into ESG in the past 2 years has been something of self-fulfilling prophecy, at least when it comes to the biggest such fund on the planet, a BlackRock exchange-traded fund that trades under the ticker ESGU, according to data from BlackRock and Morningstar.
Okay,
so do you support ESG?
So basically what he's saying is, I'm sure that was probably a little bit to digest there. But pretty much what happened was BlackRock got support for the ESG funds, the publicly traded ESG funds, which are basically the companies that support ESG. What they did was they took those companies, stocks, whatever you call it. They took their stock and then they put it into a mutual fund, so that it's just part of a big group of funds. So people started putting their investment into ESG without actually knowing that's what they were doing.
Oh,
pretty
okay.
much. Yeah.
So it's like they almost inadvertently gave this company a lot of like power.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
they pretty much gave like the organization. I want to say the organization. Yeah, the organization that runs ESG scores technically is like a non-profit. It starts with an H. I think it's like HSN or something like that. But they're the ones that actually run the entire system. I figure now is probably a good time to open the floor up a little bit. If anyone like has any thoughts, I know this episode may have been a little bit confusing to an extent, but I think basically ESG scores, it's something important to know about because it kind of gives you an idea of the world that's operating around you. Like you can kind of see like, oh well, maybe there are certain things that don't necessarily make sense. It's really just like a metric that's used to give a rating to different companies, and in summary, it affects the overall sort of position of individuals in a way, because like if you have a job,
it trickles down.
if you have a job that's trying to like maintain a good ESG, like if you have a job with a company that's trying to maintain an ESG score, the things that company does may not necessarily align with like your values or your interests or things like that. I mean, a lot of people don't care about their jobs, but if you get into like the corporate world, I'm sure that it's an issue. And as a business owner myself, obviously, I don't know if I'm ever going to make $1 billion to the point where this affects me, but even if you have a small publicly traded company, it's like there's a good example is a few years ago, a lot of people were up in arms. Like a lot of conservatives were up in arms because they made a law in California that was like, if you have a publicly traded company, you have to have at least 2 black women or 2 ethnic minority women on your leadership team. So it's not based on the merit, it's based on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So people would be confused as to how that could possibly result in a better company, I guess. But,
I see. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Steve. I know you say you're a business owner, not at $1 billion yet. Well, you probably need to work on your ESG a little bit. I don't see any women here.
ESG up.
It seems like that might be a problem right there.
Yeah, the women tend to run from me.
No, but I it's funny. This when you kind of like break it down a little bit more, get like even if you have a surface level understanding about what the ESG is, which is essentially kind of like a social score for businesses, it does kind of show or give an insight to why you might notice a lot of businesses having an incentive to do or participate in things that don't necessarily benefit the business. Like one example would be how if you remember Gillette, they had a controversy where they had this commercial that kind of like it was supposed to be talking about like men stepping up to like not be jerks and like stand up for women. It kind of had like that messaging in it, where it was kind of like it kind of framed men in a bad way and propped up like women and saying men need to be better.
Right.
And a lot of people didn't like that because I think it was kind of like it reinforced this idea in society where men a lot of times get kind of like put down in a lot of aspects, not really appreciated. And a company that literally sells products to men, you think they'd have a deep incentive to, kind of speak in men's favor, but then they went ahead and said something or did something that kind of like spoke in women's favor. And I think it had a backlash against them in terms of people like saying, like having, movements of like, don't buy Gillette, boycotting. But it probably scored well for their ESG, which means that even though people aren't going to buy, you had investors that were more interested in, like I said, investing in them anyway. So it was still kind of a win. And I think the same thing you see with, like, let's say when June comes around, or Pride Month, and all these companies are now, putting up flags and stuff like that. I think a lot of that comes from trying to maintain this kind of social credit score, which a lot of times is, not even in a conspiratorial way, but it's heavily motivated by very I would say more liberal ideologies versus conservative ideologies.
Those are good points. I mean, I just think, like you said, because of the way that the companies go about these things, you have like Target as an example, like the way that they are operating, they lost like what, $9 billion?
Over one
Probably
product.
over, like during the course of the Pride Month. But it's like I guess maybe they waited, so there's like, okay, my ESG score is going up, but we lost a lot of money. Right. So maybe the ESG score is like a long-term sacrifice that they're willing to give up for the sake of a little bit of money in the short term.
I agree.
It's interesting, but it's like, man, like how much do we value money? Like it's that ingrained that we have to base everything off of that money. Is it really the money that they care about or the actual values? It's some scary stuff.
Well, I would say these are soulless corporations, and they could give a damn about the values.
I would agree.
Like, quite frankly, like if you just look at like some of the different controversies that have happened with businesses in the past couple, months or years or whatever, a lot of the time it does seem a lot like they're just working to get their, ESG score up. And when you think about really the context of it, $9 billion to Target. It's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But over the course of like 20 years, if they can get their ESG score to max out, then maybe BlackRock gives them $20 billion in exchange for that. And they didn't even really have to earn it. They just get that to expand their sort of corporate empire.
Yeah, I think it's like, and a lot of companies operate off of, money over time versus just profit you would get from each individual, deal. So in the grand scheme of things, like I said, if a company says, we're going to lose $9 billion in a pursuit, but we're going to generate $200 billion, it's, that's a very small, that's a very small hiccup in the road. And that's how a lot of them look at it when they operate, especially when you're operating at a level like that. Money, you just anticipate money's going to come and go. So it's just a matter of, will we hit positive cash flow over time or negative? And I think that's all that really matters. And like I said, when you have when you have a company that or a conglomerate that controls that much money and that much like flow of cash, you're pretty much incentivized a lot of time that as long as you have them on your side and you appease those like entities, you're pretty much gonna be set either way. Like that's gonna be the priority over any other thing, because that's where most of the money is gonna end up coming from regardless.
Something that you see in the modern like economic world is that it's not about the customer, it's about the shareholder.
Yeah. The customer's always right. That's what you tell employees so they don't make a stink. But like, you do a good job there. Where you get at the end of the month, a pizza party and a pop can and
barely
cold pop.
Can I get a raise? Oh no.
You get a cold slice of Pizza Hut pizza from inside the Target.
Yeah. What do you mean a few days off? Like, no, you'll get that. Yeah. But I do gotta ask you, Steve. I got actually an important question. So how's the Illuminati fall into all this?
Well, you see, George Soros. No, we're actually going to talk about George Soros soon. So stay tuned to the Cold Podcast to learn more.
But any closing thoughts, guys, on the ESGs?
Anyone think anything about that?
It just seems like a metric for companies to buy into to value themselves in a public image.
Yeah.
It's like a housing score for the real estate market, and that exploded on itself. So, like, why wouldn't this?
Right.
I mean,
when you say exploded on itself, did it explode on itself in it imploded? Like
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the housing market.
Oh, yeah, that did happen, didn't it?
It did. And
this is like the subprime mortgages for stakeholders and businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah, to me, it's such an interesting part of capitalism. Like, this is one of the downsides, I guess you could say, of capitalism.
Social
like, you can't really have things be genuine anymore. It's like all money driven.
Yeah, it's got to be a score that leads to you getting more money, or else no one's going to do it. Like, why can't we just say, let's not be racist? I want to hire more like minorities.
How about we just be good?
Like, no, we have to have a score and a financial incentive.
There's always got to be an incentive.
Why would I be good if no one knows that I'm being good?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the CART test? How you can tell if someone has good moral character. It's basically this test, like when you're at a grocery store, you know, are you the type of person that just leaves their cart out, or do you push your cart back into the rack? Because the idea is that, like, if you're a person that tends to have more of a responsible character, you're going to push the cart back, because that's like one of the only things in life where it's like there's no other incentive to do it. Like, you won't get penalized for not doing it, but it's just a genuinely responsible thing to do if you do it. So that's the only motivation.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's kind of like a thing they say, like, you know, will you pass the CART test? That'll show if you're actually a good person. If people can be motivated.
You push your cart in?
Good.
Yeah, if I saw someone just fucking leaving their cart, excuse me, leaving their cart, I would be like, you're just a bad person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally.
No, push it back. Put the cart back.
Like, even when I was a like an unruly teen, I would push my cart back.
Yeah, I push my cart back all the time.
Yeah, like, you know, even when
Someone's got to do it.
I would literally steal, and I'm still pushing I would steal things, and then I would come outside and push my cart in.
Steve would run out the door with an item, but he always makes sure to close the door behind him. Trinity, you've been silent. What do you think? Will you push your cart back?
Yeah, I pushed my cart back. I don't remember why, but recently one time I didn't put my cart back, but typically I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can close it out on that one, man. ESG scores are cool.
Yeah, I hope you guys learned something.
Something to know about. I know this was probably a little bit of a heavy episode, but hey, it seemed like a fun thing.
It's
to
an interesting
talk about,
topic.
Yeah, you can take your hats off. No, I think, like I said, at the end of the day, we try to, you know, at least give you something else to think about. You know, learn more about the world. You know, it's more to life than just laughing. So yeah,
Food for your brain.
yeah, there's a little food for thought.
Now, so if you've ever heard the term identity politics, usually it's referring to this type of stuff. So you know, that's a little thing for you. Make sure you check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube, Rumble, everywhere you can find video or audio content. We're also on Patreon. $5 a month gets you the entire backlog of My Black Friends podcast, a show we have about 80 episodes of. It's hilarious, fun times, and any new episodes we create will be on Patreon too. So make sure you check it out, and we gotta pop out of here.
All right, everyone. Peace.